Do development funds reach the poor? With a focus on elementary education since 2009, PAISA has tried to answer this fundamental question of accountability by tracking school grants under the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the country's flagship program for elementary education. PAISA is conducted annually through the Annual Status of Education Report. The survey is administered by students, institutes for education and training, NGOs, and sports clubs, making PAISA the first and only citizen-led national effort to track development funds. 3 years of conducting PAISA have helped us understand the nuts and bolts of implementation, how plans are made, how monies flow, and finally whether expenditure reflects needs on the ground. Here's what we've found. Since PAISA began its journey, the budget for Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan has more than doubled from Rs 26,169 crore in 2009-10 to Rs 55,746 crore in 2011-12. The increase in SSA budgets, however, has not been uniform across states. Outlays in Andhra Pradesh and West Bengal doubled, while those in Jharkhand, Rajasthan and Haryana increased by 30 to 40% from 2009-10 to 2010-11. How have these resources been prioritized? Allocations for teachers represented the highest share of the total budget, standing at 44% in 2011-12, an increase of 4 percentage points from 2010-11. This figure has, however, decreased from 45% in 2009-10. School infrastructure is the second most critical budget item, receiving 36% of the budget in 2011-12 and 2010-11, an increase of 4 percentage points from 2009-10. Entitlements to children and programs to bring out-of-school children to school received the third largest share of the SSA budget, standing at 10% in 2011-12, a decrease from 14% in 2010-11 and 11% in 2009-10. Quality-specific activities represented 4% of the total allocations in 2009-10, which decreased to 2% in 2011-12. How much of this money reaches schools? Under SSA, all schools in rural India are entitled to 3 core grants. These are the School Maintenance Grant, meant for minor repairs and upkeep of infrastructure such as whitewashing, toilet repairs, hand pumps, playing fields, etc. The School Development Grant is provided to purchase office consumables and other items necessary for the school to function properly. And the Teaching Learning Material Grant is meant for the purchase of low-cost teaching aids such as maps and charts. In 2010-11, these grants accounted for 5% of the total SSA budget. To find out what happens to this money, PAISA surveyed over 14,200 rural Indian schools asking the following questions. Do schools get their money? Does money reach on time? Do schools get all their money? Do schools spend their money? And how do schools spend their money? Over a 3-year period, we've seen some improvement in the number of schools receiving their money. In 2010-11, 82% of schools reported receipt of grant, as opposed to 77% of schools in 2008-9. There were also variations across grant type. The percentage of schools reporting receipt of grant was much higher for SMG and TLM at 84% and 87% respectively than for SDG, which 77% of schools reported receiving in 2010-11. Grants, however, don't always arrive on time. The ASER and PAISA survey is conducted between October and November every year, which is about halfway through the school year. At this time, all schools are asked whether they have received funds for the current fiscal year, that is, the year in which the survey is conducted. In 2011-12, only 53% of schools reported receipt of grants at the time of the survey. This is a marginal drop from 2009-10, when 59% of schools reported grant receipt. There were, however, variations across states. Punjab schools reported the most dramatic fluctuations. In 2009-10, 80% of schools reported receiving their grants by November. This increased to 91% in 2010-11, before dropping to 32% in 2011-12. Added to the problem of late arrival of grants is that schools do not report receiving all their grants. In 2010-11, only 70% of schools reported receiving all three grants. There were statewide variations in this as well. Grant receipts in Rajasthan improved from 38% of schools reporting receiving all three grants in 2008-9 to 54% in 2010-11. Himachal Pradesh also saw a significant improvement from 71% of schools receiving all three grants in 2008-9 to 90% in 2010-11. What do schools do with the money that does reach them? 90% of schools report spending their money. Much of the expenditure is on essential supplies. Whitewashing is another activity on which schools spend their money. 68% of schools in India reported whitewashing their school walls. But spending does not always reflect school needs. During PAISA, we discovered that schools often receive orders from the administration directing them to incur expenditure on specific items. In one interesting case, a school that was still to construct its school building was required to purchase fire safety equipment because the order instructed the school to do so. Left with no choice, the school bought the equipment and furnished the requisite documents, but requested the shopkeeper concerned to hold on to the equipment till the school building was built. In 2009, the Indian Parliament passed the landmark Right to Education Act, which led to large increases in the elementary education budget. However, if the RTE is to be implemented in its true spirit, a fundamental transformation is required in education finance and planning. The PAISA survey highlights the need to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of expenditures. We need to make sure that funds reach schools on time so that schools may incur expenditure to meet their needs. But most importantly, schools must have the autonomy to meet their needs. PAISA points out that the current model for financing education is extremely top-down, leaving schools with little autonomy to link needs with expenditure. This ought to give way to a bottom-up approach, where local needs are prioritized. Plans and expenditures need to be aligned to school needs and children's learning, rather than to teachers and infrastructure. Achieving this is the challenge of the future.